Hey, what's going on, guys, and welcome back to another video. So, as requested, I have another tier list video coming in, and I've thought long and hard on how I want to make it. And shout out to Hecturnus from the Discord who recommended me this online website called Tiermaker, which will let me make it in a very clear and concise fashion. As you can see, the 35 civs in the game are at the bottom. I've got 6 tiers to put them in, and I'm gonna just do my best to spread them out. But then I have to ask myself, how do I want to even split up these civs? What are my criteria to base my tier list on? And I've decided, after much internal thoughts and debates, I decided to go with best overall civs in the game. And the reason I chose this is because we're playing the ranked map pool with a variety of maps. All the tournaments that come in have a lot of different maps as well. We're seeing a lot of land maps, a lot of hybrid maps, and a lot of pure water maps as well. We're seeing some closed maps as well, like Arena, Black Forest coming into the ranked pool, and some tournaments. So I decided, best overall civs in the game, let's hop into it. And I've listened to your feedback, and you guys have told me there's a lot of blank space on my screen. So I'm going to do my best in this video, bye-bye facecam, to make use of all the space I got available to me. All right? So let's just hop into it. I did prepare a script as well, so I know exactly where my civs will be placed. And I'm not going to wing this as I have in the past. So I am learning, and let's hop into it here. So before I get started, I just want to quickly say each civ, or each tier list rather, each tier will contain an undefined amount of civs. Like I just put them where I felt like they deserve to be. I didn't limit myself to any amount of civ per tier. And I will also say that since it's an overall civ list, it's going to be about the civs that can perform the best across a variety of settings. You're going to notice that at the top of the list near the S tier, it's going to be the civs that are very versatile. And then as we go down, it's going to be the civs that have some strengths, but are lacking in some other areas that just drops them a couple tiers. So around B and C, you're going to see a lot of the one-trick civs. And around A and S, you're going to see the very flexible civs. And then D and F, you're going to see the civs that, well, they're kind of lacking. All right, so let's hop into it. Within each tier, I'm not going to be ordering them. I'm simply going to put them in alphabetical order. And so there's no preference between the civs in each tier, okay? Or within the tier. So to start off here, we have the Aztecs. Who would have thought Aztecs making an appearance? I mean, Aztecs are just really strong across so many different settings. They have a great economy, which makes them one of the best civs on open land maps and closed land maps for that matter. They have great siege, great skirmishers, great eagles, so they can play both, the gold in the early game, mid game, and they can play the trash war with their strong pikes and skirmishers. And of course, having great monks always helps to sprinkle those guys in. Aztecs' biggest weakness is probably pure water maps and team games being in the pocket position. However, I think that they're so strong on the other maps that, and they're not even that weak on those maps because they have Bracer and great economy. So I had to put them at S tier simply because they were just so dominant on too many maps here. The next one, and I think the best current civ in the game, is going to be the Chinese. Needless to say, I mean, this has been banned or picked almost instantly in every tournament we've seen in 2020. It recently lost redemption. However, even this isn't enough to make it or to take it away from being the most flexible civ in the game. It can do pretty much anything. I struggle to find any map that this civ is not like top 10 on. Probably pure water maps like Islands is where it struggles the most. But even then, it's just that it has a rough start, but it still has great tech in the late game to be able to play. So Chinese can play everything, and they can play even team games and 1v1s. It just has no clear weakness. On the land, I'd say, though, that since they lost redemption, some like Halb and Siege Onager push on some choke points could be dangerous against Chinese. But other than that, they seem to be very dominant. Persians is going to be my third and final civ for this S tier. Why Persians? I just felt like Persians are too strong on mixed maps. Hybrid maps, Persians are dominating. They're best civ by far on Nomad and Mediterranean. You guys have seen my YouTube video about the maps. I've recommended them on like 3 or 4 maps in the ranked pool. And they're even great on land maps, both open and closed. Good in team game 1v1, and good in early and late game. So it just feels like Persians nowadays are too dominant and don't have any clear weaknesses. And yes, they might be weaker than some civs in certain situations. I think overall they're really powerful, and they definitely deserve S tier as an overall civ in the game. All right, moving on down to A tier now. Again, we're going to see a drop in consistency most likely from the S tier civs. However, these civs are still extremely consistent and often will have their own specialty, their own kind of like powerhouse as well. So, first civ here, gonna be the Britons. Britons have a great economy with their cheaper TCs and their sheep bonus in the early game. They have really solid spikes throughout the game as well, getting the extra range on the crossbow, then on the arbalest, and then finally in the late game with the longbow and werewolf trebs. It's just they have such strong units at so many different stages in the game that it's hard to not put the civ at A tier. It also excels in team game flank positions, 1v1s. It could pass on water maps, and it's not bad on hybrid maps either. So it just feels like it doesn't really have that many weaknesses, and definitely deserves A tier in my opinion. Next up is going to be a tricky one, I think. It's going to be the Huns, and now normally I would have no problem putting the Huns at A, but I had to think about this one on this particular list just because we haven't seen too many Huns in the past couple tournaments, or haven't seen them do too well, at least in NEC and Hidden Cup, the two major tournaments of 2020. But I think that the reason for that is because those maps simply favored other civs more. And the specialty of the Huns is not so much that it excels in certain situations, but more of it's like a jack of all traits. And I think the only thing that Huns can't do is closed land maps like Black Forest, because they're missing out on onagers. But semi-closed maps like Arena, where you start with a wall but the map is more or less open, they can pass. They're definitely like, okay on those kind of maps, and they're great in open maps as well, like Arabia. And they can play water maps as well. So I think Huns overall very flexible, very solid, and I have to give them A tier, even though they might have not performed that well in the past couple tournaments. Next up is going to be the Khmer. Khmer. I mean, what a change the civ has seen in the past few patches. It went from being arguably one of the worst civs to arguably one of the best civs in the game, and it now has, I think, probably the best uncontested boom in the game. So if you leave the civ alone, it's by far the best civ to boom with, at least as far as I know, or at least definitely top 3. And it just has great options in general as well. They have great late game, good mid game. I think the only thing it's missing really from being an all-around great civ is thumb ring, and that's it. It has such good options nowadays. It can be amazing in pocket play, good in 1v1, good on land maps, good on hybrid maps even. Maybe not the best on water or hybrid, but it's definitely passable. And it just excels in those like boomy maps like Arena or Hideout. And we've seen tons of Khmer in competitive play, especially in the past 2 tournaments. All right, so after Khmer, we will have good old Mayans. Yes, one of my favorite civs in the game. I debated on putting the civ on S tier, as I did with Khmer as well. But the reason I decided not to is because I feel like the civs in S tier simply outperformed Mayans on most maps. It just felt like there's not a whole lot of situations where I'd want Mayans over those top 3 civs. And usually Mayans only shine after those top 3 civs have been either picked or banned. And so I think that Mayans are definitely top 5 in a lot of situations, but not pushing the top 3 quite yet. However, the civ is still great on land maps, both open and semi-closed. They might struggle a little bit on Black Forest. They're extremely closed maps, but overall they get by. They've got bracers that they can play decently well on water maps, and they're perfectly fine on hybrid maps in a lot of cases as well. So overall, a solid civ for me. Definitely deserves A tier. And maybe with a little bit more tweaks, or maybe a little bit of nerfs on the top 3 civs, it could sneak into S tier as well. All right, next up is going to be a civ that I think I got a recent spike in, maybe not like strength, but definitely popularity with the Mongols. I think people are starting to realize just how strong Mangudai really are. I mean, it might help because of the melee pathing and DE being not the best still, although it's gotten some major improvements in the past couple patches. Mangudai are simply one of the best units in the game, and are definitely the vocal point, I think, of focal point, not vocal, focal point of Mongols as a civ. But even still, Mongols are a great and flexible civ in so many situations. Like, they can play team game, flank, or pocket. Flank being the outside guy, and pocket being the inside guy if you're thinking about like a 3v3 or 4v4. They can play 1v1s. They're great on hybrid maps, as we've seen them dominate Bay, otherwise known as Pants, in Hidden Cup. And they simply just do everything. And Mangudai in the late game are almost unmatched. There's only a few civs that can really deal with them, like and match them. Other civs can just try their best to keep the Mangudai at bay, but Mongols just seem to have power spikes at the right locations, and I think the tournament results speak for themselves. Definitely an A tier civ for me. And finally, my last civ at A tier is going to be the Vikings. Yes, Vikings, great economy, really strong on water maps as well. Maybe a little bit questionable on some certain hybrid maps, but they definitely have their place. They're good in 1v1s, good in team games. They can play pocket, they can play flank. It's just they don't really have too many weaknesses, and their berserks are also really strong. I think we've seen a lot of play from berserks in Hidden Cup. I think me versus Doubt, we both used berserks in our series, both winning those games as well. And I think with the Viking economy backed by strong unit options and great water play, hard to compete with them in a lot of cases. So definitely A tier for me. And our boy Fatslav, he's making them work on Black Forest since day one as well. So can't complain on that regard as well. Okay, dropping down to B tier. You're gonna notice on the B tier, we're gonna have some civs that are excellent in certain situations and then kind of lackluster in others, and that's kind of the theme I went for this tier. So let's go ahead and see just exactly what I'm talking about. First one, gonna be the Celts. Yeah, Celts I think is one of those civs where it could be A tier in a lot of cases, but simply because it's lacking bracer and it's not the best on hybrid and pretty bad on pure water maps, I simply just couldn't put it as an A tier civ. Although it's fantastic on closed land maps, it's great on open land maps as well. It's definitely does pretty well in team games and simply performs overall pretty nicely. Great economy, great siege, great infantry, and passable cavalry, I suppose. I think it's just missing, bracer and some water play to really put it up higher. Although it could be decent on certain hybrid maps as well. So for me, B tier for Celts, solid stuff. Next up, we got a civ that was recently patched or recently buffed even more. The Cumans. Yes, Cumans. I mean, they went from, in my opinion, one of the worst civs in the game to being quite strong now. Getting the recent change on their kip checks, making them a little bit more viable. Also getting their getting step lancers buffed and getting their step husbandry affecting the step lancers, and finally a fourth buff, yes, getting cap ram access in Castle Age. I think it just pushed them to a B tier civ for me overall. I mean, Cumans have always been good on maps in team games where you can boom and go for the double TC in Feudal Age. However, now I feel like they have even another spike in late Castle Age where they can go with like mass light cap spam or mass step lancer spam with kip checks behind them, being an extremely hard composition to stop. And of course, in team games, they have access to very fast Paladin in the late game as well. So, Cumans, maybe lacking bracers, probably the only reason, and some good water play. The only reason I'm not putting them any higher. They're really solid right now. B tier for sure. Next up is going to be the Franks. Franks is an interesting one because I used to have them a lot higher on my list, but I felt like with these melee pathing issues and Franks not having bracer, it just felt really hard to justify putting them any higher than B tier. Also on a variety of maps, they're not great on water, not great on hybrid. It just feels like they're an awkward civ in a lot of cases, and I think you can make an argument to even put the civ on C tier. I just think that they're so strong on pocket play in team games and in scouts into night play in 1v1s that I decided to just still keep them as B tier, because in what they do good, they do it great, and they definitely have a fair amount of options as well with the throwing axeman and the solid eco behind it. So, B tier for Franks, but definitely not as solid as it once was. Next up, we're gonna have the Incas. Yes, so the weakest on paper of the Mesocivs. However, this can be one of the strongest in certain situations. We've seen the famous Inca Villager Rush being put to decent use in NEC and in Hidden Cup. I myself used it to, sketchy success, I suppose, in Hidden Cup, winning versus Tato in the semifinals, using the Inca Rush, and then losing the same matchup versus Viper in the finals. But I think overall, Incas is a very flexible civ, and they don't have the best economy, but they have a variety of units and strong power spikes as well. But definitely up there, I think, for their Inca Villager Rush, which has been pretty powerful in certain tournaments over the past few ones. Next up, I've got the Indians. I think Indians have seen a lot of play in Hidden Cup, probably because of the maps, But Indians dominate any map where there's shorefish access. But not only that, I think they're a solid civ in general as well. I mean, 1v1s, they have their weaknesses. They die to meso civs, and they're overall not the most flexible. But for team games, they can play the pocket position really well. They have bracer access, so they can play hybrid maps to a decent degree as well, because they have great economy, bracer access, fast units, Hussar in the late game. So overall, in 1v1 and team game, they have their strengths, they have their weaknesses, but they're enough to satisfy the B tier, I think, here. And of course, being dominant in shorefish maps definitely helps out a little bit. Next up, we have the Italians. If we're talking about pure water maps, Italians is the best civ in the game by far, statistically speaking, and just practically speaking as well. So many bonuses for the water maps. They've been played either first or second priority in, most of the time first actually, in pure water maps. They're great in hybrid maps as well. It's just that they fall short in most land maps because they don't really have that many good bonuses to play with. But they can get by in Arena. They're okay on Arabia, and so I just had to put them on B tier here. Probably could have been higher up if it's just water map we're talking about, of course. But taking everything into consideration, I settled for the B tier for them. Next up is going to be the Japanese. So somewhere Spirit of the Law is nodding his head with approval, but probably slightly disappointed that the Japanese didn't make the A tier. I just feel like they're a solid civ overall, kind of like the Huns, but I don't know, something about them missing the +4 armor on the cavalry makes me not want to put them any higher because they fall short in pocket positions in the team, in team game pocket positions. They're great on hybrid maps. They're good on full modern maps. They're good on open land maps. Not great on closed land maps, and not great in team games, except maybe on the flank position. So, and even then, they're like top 10, top 15. So, I don't know. For me, it just feels like Japanese is one of those overall civs, but not quite as overall as Huns, and therefore I gave them B tier. Feel free to interchange them, though. I think you can make an argument for Japanese being A tier as well. Next up, we have the Malay. Yeah, Malay is a tricky civ because it's great on water maps, and it's great on hybrid maps, and it's even decent on land maps and maps like Arena where you can get a free boom off. But missing 2 armor on the cav, like both the final armor and the second armor on the cav, just hurts it a lot in certain situations. Also, it has a bit of a flimsy early game in high intensity or high aggression early games, like in feudal age tower rushes situations. It could be a little bit vulnerable. I felt like B tier is good for this civ. It has a great late game as well. I don't know. It's just that it has good strengths. But it has its weaknesses. So I think B tier for it. I didn't want to go higher. I didn't want to go lower. I was happy with it here. Next up is going to be the Malians. Malians is another one of the civs that can kind of do it all. Very flexible, and they can play hybrid maps to a really good degree as well. Probably not the best on pure water, but they generally get by with a good amount of siege, cavalry, infantry, all that good stuff. And even their unique unit, the Gebero, is not too bad. They also excel in maps like Nomad. I think they're slightly behind Persians, maybe top 5 or top 3 Nomad civilizations at the moment. But I just didn't put them higher because they're lacking Bracer. It kind of makes their late game awkward. Also, they're lacking Paladin. I know they have Farimba, but it's really not the same thing in team games. So for me, B tier for Malians, and I think they should be happy with that. 3 more civs for the B tier. We got the Slavs. Slavs is one of those civs that's great, kind of like Celts. Great economy, great cavalry, great on land maps, pretty good on closed land maps as well. But they're just lacking on hybrid maps and pure water maps, and they don't have Arbalest access as well. They don't have Bracer. They're good at what they do, but they have their weaknesses. They're not that flexible. Similar to Celts for this one. All right, next up is an interesting one. It's the Tatars. Yes, I had a hard time finding them, but I'm pretty sure this is the Tatars. Yes. Tatars got recently buffed, and they get now their thumb ring for free when they hit Castle Age, and they also got an indirect buff with the Step Lancer being buffed up as well. I think Tatars, and they got the Flaming Camel, which is borderline irrelevant, and the unique tech that gives +2 range on Trebs, so a bit more situational now with that one. I think the Tatars are really strong now. I didn't do enough testing to really say for sure where I want them, but they're great on land maps. They have a good late game, good early game. They get enough power spikes to feel deadly in certain situations, but they're just lacking something in the mid game to really push them any higher. But B tier for Tatars. Before this patch, they were maybe D or C. And so they definitely got a good spike. I'm happy with them at B. And then finally, we got another weird one, Vietnamese. Yeah, they got recently buffed as well. They don't need any, I believe it was wood for their eco bonuses, which means that they can get really clean builds now. And the Vietnamese have always been a civ with a fair amount of options. The Rattan Archer is a good unique unit as well. And they have +4 on the cap, so they can play really well with in 1v1 games, both in early and late game. And now they have a good eco bonus. They can actually get to those late game options, and they feel a little bit smoother to play. Pretty valuable in team games in the flank as well, with the team bonus to give access or to be able to see. Actually, I don't know if it's their team bonus. I don't think so actually, but they're able to see where the TCs are of the enemies. So Vietnamese is definitely pretty solid overall B tier civ for me. All right, hopping down over to the C tier, you're gonna notice that B tier and C tier are the ones that are the most packed because this game is in a great position balance-wise, which means that a lot of the civs are going to be middle of the table, which is what you expect to see. C tier civs are the ones that have great options, but they just lack in the eco bonus to actually get to those options, or they have pretty good power spikes, but again, some major weaknesses coming up. So first civ that comes to mind, the Berbers. Again, Berbers have no real weakness if you look at the civ from an overall post-in perspective, but they're just lacking that eco bonus to really get to those powerful options in the mid and late game, and oftentimes feel a little bit awkward to get by in the Dark Age and Feudal Age compared to other top tier civilizations. But Berbers can play really well in a lot of settings. They're okay on hybrid maps, maybe not the best on pure water maps, although they do get their faster moving ships. I believe that's Berbers, yeah it is. And then, they're great on land map with their camel archers and their cheaper stable units. Again, it's really just the fact that they're missing an eco bonus. If they did get one, I can see them easily jumping over to A tier even. That's how important it would be for them. But of course, for balance issues, I think they're perfectly fine on C tier. I like Berbers where they are, and they could be powerful in a lot of situations. A similar civ, actually, is going to be the Byzantines, where if they can make it to the late game, oftentimes they're very strong, very versatile, a lot of different options to go for. Cheap trash units also helps you play in the early game. I just think that Byzantines is lacking that eco bonus to really push them any further, and oftentimes feel slightly awkward to play. However, if played correctly, Byzantines can be very, very strong, and can arguably be B tier here, depending on who you talk to. For me personally, I think C tier is more than fine. And we even saw Byzantines being used to counter civs like Mayans or Britons in NEC. It was quite popular to pick them on Arabia, for example. Next up is the Ethiopians. So Ethiopians do get some eco bonus. They have good power spikes, but they have their weaknesses. They have actually very poor cavalry. And even their archers aren't the best in the game. They get outpaced by Britons quite heavily, and by Mayans, I would say, as well. And so, they're supposed to be an archer/siege civilization, and while they do a good job getting to their strong units in reasonable time, it just feels like they don't ever shine over other civs, and I had a hard time putting them any higher than C tier here. They're not great in team games, nothing special on water maps, they're nothing special on hybrid maps either, and overall they feel like a more or less generic civ that excels in certain situations with their archers. But even then, kind of hide behind the shadow of other top tier archer civs. Next up is an interesting one, Koreans. So I think depending on who you talk to, Koreans can be a bit higher up on the list. Viper, where you at? I see your turtle ships and your towers, but I had a hard time putting them higher than C tier, simply because their eco bonus is for stone. They also save some wood on some units. They're good on hybrid maps. They're okay on pure water maps. They're not the best on open land maps. The Tower Rush really isn't that special in Feudal Age, so they only get that kind of spike in Castle Age. And they're not the best in team games. However, they still have, pretty reasonable options throughout. They have a strong late game as well. And they have some potential combinations like their, Mangonel wagons that could be extremely powerful in Castle and in Imperial Age. So a dangerous civilization, just maybe a little bit awkward to play in some situations. Next up, we have the Lithuanians, a new civ that is kind of like a flexible civ in the sense that it has a small bonus for all kinds of maps. So for water maps, it's more or less generic, but Since you start with the extra food, you get to go to wood earlier, which means you get to get fishing ships out earlier. So in high level play, this actually extends to kind of a eco bonus, like a even stronger eco bonus than just on a land map. And they also get a really open tech tree in the late game with great cav archers, great paladins. Picking up relics is always a nice little thing in 1v1s. Decent in team games again as well, and maybe even pocket positions. And overall, they seem like they're pretty solid. Faster moving, scrims and spears is pretty solid as well, mostly for 1v1s. But overall, it just feels like it doesn't shine enough over other civs to put it any higher. It doesn't. It feels like there's no situation where Lithuanians is the pick. You know what I mean? It's missing Arbalest as well, so it could be awkward on flank in team games. But overall, it's not a terrible civ by any means, and it has decent options throughout. Next up is going to be the Magyars. Similar to the Berbers, Magyars have insane units in late game, just have kind of a hard time to get there in a lot of situations. However, they do have a little bit of a spike in Feudal Age, getting the forging for free, and the cheaper scouts. And of course in Castle Age again, getting iron casting for free, and the knights can come out nice and strong. But it just feels like without an eco bonus, it's hard to really get to the late game Magyar Hussar plus heavy cav archer oftentimes. But Magyars are still solid in team games, 1v1s, mixed maps, pure water they can pass as well. They have bracer access, so if you'll notice, bracer is a very important tech for a lot of these maps. Magyars definitely a solid C tier for me, similar to Berbers in my opinion. Saracens, Tado, this is your civ, man. Tado loves the Saracens, but for me personally, I find it hard to justify giving them anything higher than C tier. Their market bonus is cute, and it can make them strong in certain situations. And they do have Arbalest and some strong heavy cav archer with great siege in late game. But again, it's just hard to get there in a lot of 1v1s, I feel like. Although they do have great navy, and they do have reasonable ability to play hybrid maps and land maps. It just feels like they're a jack of all traits, but don't have the eco bonus to make use of those traits as much as civs like Huns. And yes, the market bonus is an eco bonus. I just don't think it's as strong as other ones in the game. Finally, we're going to have potentially a controversial one, Spanish. I don't think Spanish are that good anymore, and hear me out. A recent change with DE means that conquistadors count as cav archers, which then means that skirmishers do so much damage against them. Like skirmishers, I think 5 or 6 skirms, maybe like 7 or 8, can one-shot a conquistador fully upgraded, and it's ridiculous how strong skirms are versus this unit. I think that change alone brought it down from maybe a B or A tier civ on land maps to a C tier civ. And Spanish, again, kind of like Byzantine, has a great tech tree in the late game, just doesn't really have the eco bonus to get there. However, it does have the Conquistador Snowball, which, with Conquistadors and Mangonels could actually take out skirmishes as well in late Castle Age. But again, it just feels a little bit awkward to get there nowadays. And, while it is a jack of all trades, it's not really the play in a lot of situations. Although I do have it a C tier, I think its best use is probably in team games where it can make use of that trade bonus for the team. Alright, that's it for the C tier. Let's hop on to the D tier and the F tier now. These ones will have very little civs in comparison, so if you guys are wondering, why is it taking so long? Well, I gotta place 35 civs, okay? So bear with me here. Alright, D tier. Sorry, Doubt. I know you love them, man, but the Bulgarians, I just couldn't put them any higher than D tier. They have interesting options, to say the least, with their Krepos, their Conic, great cavalry, I suppose. They get the free infantry upgrades, and their unique tech gives their infantry, the 200 swordsmen, tons of melee armor. I don't know the exact amount. So they have solid options, and they do have an eco bonus as well. Their town centers cost minus 50 stone, but missing crossbow, not having like a solid not having a smooth transition to really any of the units, I feel is like the worst part of the civ. And I think in the right hands, it could be strong, and we have seen Doubt make it work in a lot of cases as well. I just feel like personally, it's an easy civ to punish, and it's not anything special on land maps. On water maps or hybrid maps. So it's really only a land civ, and even then, it has its strong or its significant weak points. So couldn't put it any higher than this. Next up, in a similar boat here, is going to be the Burmese. Good economy, they get the free wood upgrades. They have Bracer, but they're missing +2 armor on skirmishers. This is a big deal here. Not having skirmisher or strong skirmisher access means you die out to so many of the archer civs, which are proven, which have and are meta, which have been and are meta for the past months in DE because of the melee pathing being lackluster. And so Burmese just, I struggle to find any place to really put them in. Their Rambai are still quite strong though, so they have their powerful options. They have good infantry and a solid late game, good monks, decent siege. So they're flexible civs to some degree, but again, missing that skirmisher armor is just too huge in 1v1s. And again, they're nothing too special in water maps or hybrid maps, and nothing too special in team games either. So for me, Burmese D tier for me. And I know I'm repeating myself a lot here. I've been talking for a long time. But yeah, definitely D tier here. All right, Portuguese. Another sorry goes out to Viper here, and I know he's been messing around with the recently buffed Fitioras. But Portuguese, man, it feels like a jack of all trades, but again, lacking the eco bonus to make use of them. However, they are great on water maps, so maybe you can make an argument to put this as C tier. But in a lot of cases, I just didn't really find it special enough to make it up there. But I will think, I don't feel too strongly about this one. I think this can go C or D tier. I just put it in D tier to fill in more civs. And I think that Portuguese is passable in a lot of situations, but they don't have a map that I really want to choose Portuguese. Although I will say the free Carta bonus for team games is quite nice. So you know what? Actually, let's bump it. Let's bump it. I was convinced. Let's bump it to C tier. The only civ I will change here. I talked myself into it. You're welcome, Viper. It's back to C tier. Okay, because again, it is flexible and it has its uses, I suppose, over other civs. So let's put it up to C tier. Which brings us to our last civ in the D tier, the Turks. Oh, next to Burmese for a similar reason, they are lacking elite skirmishers, which again makes them lose to a lot of the top tier archer civs. And again, missing onager as well means that they have even less options versus those archer civs. And as I found out the hard way in NEC, Turks actually are not a good matchup into Britons, believe it or not, on Arena even. But yeah, Turks, they do have the fast imp arena play, which is okay, but it's kind of like a cute move if anything. We haven't seen any or too much play from them in tournament play, and overall, I struggle to have a good use for them. They're not that special in lands, not that special in water, nothing special in team game 1v1. So for me, D tier is perfectly fine for the civ, and for the only two F tier civs, the Goths and the Teutons. I'm going to put them both at once because they're very similar. Civs without Bracer. Civs without any really like fast options. Goths do have a good drush nowadays, but with the recent nerfs and some reverts, some bonuses being reverted or changed rather, it feels more like the older Goths where it's a one-trick pony. And even that one trick is not that strong. Their infantry is, while the Goth spam can be hard to stop in certain situations, a lot of top level players will know how to counter it and how to prepare for it, because let's face it, it's the only option that Goths have. Similar with Teutons, they don't have any strong and fast options. They have a terrible late game missing light cap and husbandry. I struggle to find a good use for Teutons. Teutons at least can play a good pocket position and can play decent in closed maps. Goths, I don't know where you put them, but I don't know. These two civs have some problems, and even with Teutons getting a buff on their farms and that joke of a +1 armor on their infantry units, I still struggle to place them any higher than this. It seems like I don't want to ever see these civs on my team, or even in a 1v1. So that's going to be my tier list for the overall best civs in Age of Empires. I hope it wasn't too long for you guys. It took me a couple takes to do this, so it was very long for me. Let me put the cam back on so you guys can see that there's actually not a robot talking this whole time. It was me. And I'll fix the overlay later. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed my tier list, man. And I'll see you guys in the next video, I guess. This is day 7, I believe, of 30 for April. Hopefully you guys are enjoying. Be sure to check the Discord if you made it this far. In the description, join that. 4K people, builders, all that stuff. I'm tired now. I'm gonna go sleep. But take care, guys. Hope you enjoy the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.